And I'm Stella, 32 years old and a successful interior designer with my own company in Manhattan. The moment is seared into my memory. My father standing in my luxury apartment looking around with that familiar disdain before declaring, "You're nothing but cheap." Those words echoed through my carefully curated space, awakening years of painful memories and judgments. After nearly a decade of silence between us, he had finally come to see what I'd built for myself. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're watching, please hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. This story might change how you think about value forever. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, our house looked perfectly normal from the outside. Two-story colonial, neatly trimmed lawn family car in the driveway. But inside those walls, money was like a religion, and my father Lawrence was its most devout priest. As a bank manager, he didn't just manage other people's money, he worshipped the act of saving it. My mother Diana was a kindergarten teacher, gentle and creative, but completely financially dependent on my father. She had no access to credit cards, no personal savings, and had to account for every dollar she spent. Their relationship dynamic was set in stone long before I was born. He controlled, she complied. A penny saved is more than a penny earned, my father would lecture at dinner. It's a penny plus dignity. These dinners were never fancy. Store-brand everything, portions carefully measured, leftovers meticulously saved. We never ate out, not even for birthdays or special occasions. That was throwing money away, according to my father. My closet was filled with second-hand clothes, carefully selected from thrift stores and clearance racks. I learnt to check price tags before I even looked at what the item was. The number mattered more than the fit, the style, or whether I actually liked it. Fashion is for fools, my father would say. Only shallow people care about appearances. When I was 10, I spent an entire Saturday working on a watercolor painting of our family. I used the good paper my art teacher had given me as a gift for showing talent. When my father saw it, his face darkened. "Do you know how much this paper costs? This is waste, pure waste." He tore it up in front of me, the pieces fluttering to the floor like confetti, for a celebration that would never happen. I didn't paint again for years. My brother Eric was 4 years older than me. He was my protector, my confidant, the only one who would roll his eyes behind our father's back when the lectures about money started. "Just nod and plan your escape," he'd whisper to me. True to his word, the day after his high school graduation, Eric packed a single duffel bag and left. He didn't even say goodbye to our parents. Just hugged me tight and said, "I'll call when I'm settled. This isn't your forever, Stell." The calls were few and far between. Eric wanted to sever all ties with our father, and maintaining contact with me meant risking Lawrence finding out where he was. I understood, but it left me alone in that house of rigid rules and financial obsession. The value of a person lies in their ability to save, my father would pronounce as if sharing universal wisdom. People who spend frivolously are worth nothing. They have no character, no backbone. He particularly despised people who spent money on their homes. Paying for fancy furniture or decorations is the mark of an empty mind. A house is for shelter, not showing off. As I grew older, my father's fixation on frugality shaped me in ways I wouldn't fully understand until much later. I developed anxiety about spending. Even buying necessary items like school supplies would leave me with a knot in my stomach. I'd stand in store aisles frozen with indecision, hearing my father's voice in my head. "Is this essential? Is there a cheaper option? Are you being wasteful?" Every purchase became a moral judgment, a reflection of my character. If I bought a slightly more expensive notebook because I liked the cover, I was frivolous. If I wanted new shoes because the old ones were obviously worn out but technically still functional, I was wasteful. If I expressed desire for anything beyond the absolute basics, I was shallow. My mother tried to soften the harsh edges of my father's financial doctrine when she could. Sometimes she'd slip me a few dollars with a gentle squeeze of my hand. "Buy something pretty," she'd whisper, but always with a nervous glance toward the door as if my father might materialize at any moment to witness this financial treason. I learned to hide things, small treasures I found or purchased with birthday money from relatives. A pretty rock, a colorful pen, a magazine about interior design that I kept under my mattress, like some kids might hide inappropriate material. These tiny rebellions were my secret garden, the one place my father's critical voice couldn't reach. Winter was particularly difficult. My father kept the thermostat so low that we could see our breath in the mornings. "Put on another sweater." was his answer to any complaint about the cold. I would layer clothing to sleep, pile blankets on my bed, anything to stay warm without incurring the cost of heating the house to a comfortable temperature. Once when I was 12, I got invited to a birthday party at the home of a wealthy classmate. Their house was beautiful, warm, filled with art and comfortable furniture. For the first time, I saw how a home could feel. Not just functional, but welcoming. Not just a place to sleep, but a space that expressed who the people living there truly were. Something awakened in me that day, a longing I couldn't yet name, but would eventually become my life's passion. When I got home and innocently described the beautiful house to my parents, my father launched into one of his most vicious tirades. Those people are morally bankrupt, living beyond their means, showing off with things they don't need. That's why this country is going to hell. People like that with no self-control, no understanding of true value. I learned to keep my emerging aesthetic appreciation to myself after that, but the seed had been planted. Somewhere deep inside, I began to question my father's doctrine. What if beauty did have value? What if creating a space that felt good wasn't shallow, but deeply human? These questions would take years to fully form, but they were there waiting for the right conditions to grow. By the time I turned 15, I had begun to recognize the distorted worldview my father had constructed around money. It wasn't normal to equate spending with moral failure. It wasn't universal truth that beauty and comfort were frivolous. Other families bought new clothes without agonizing over the decision. Other homes had decorations that served no purpose beyond bringing joy. My rebellion started small and silent. I began collecting discarded items from neighbors' trash or yard sales. Broken lamps, faded picture frames, worn furniture. I'd bring them to our garage and secretly restore them using skills I taught myself through library books and later internet tutorials. With minimal investment, I transformed these cast-offs into beautiful objects. The first piece I ever refurbished was an old wooden jewelry box I found in someone's discarded moving boxes. The finish was scratched, one hinge broken. I carefully repaired it, sanded it down, and painted it a deep navy blue, with gold accents I created using a technique I'd read about. When finished, it looked like something from an expensive boutique. I kept these projects hidden from my father, revealing them only to my mother, who would marvel at my transformations. "You have a gift, Stella," she'd whisper, her eyes lighting up in a way they rarely did anymore. "You see the potential in things others discard." At 16, I got my first job at Renewed Spaces, a local furniture and home decor shop that specialized in vintage and upcycled pieces. The owner, Angela Moretti, was a 60-something Italian-American woman with an artist's eye and a businesswoman's practicality. From the moment she interviewed me, there was a connection. She recognized something in me that I barely understood myself. "You've got the eye, kid," she said, after watching me rearrange a display during my trial shift. "You understand that value isn't just about what something costs. It's about what it brings to a space, how it makes people feel." Working at Renewed Spaces opened up a whole new world. I learned about different design periods, materials, techniques for restoration. More importantly, I was surrounded by people who valued aesthetics, who understood that creating beautiful spaces wasn't shallow, but a profound expression of humanity. Angela became my first real mentor. She taught me not just about design, but about the psychology behind it. "People's homes reflect their inner lives," she would say. "When you help someone create a beautiful space, you're helping them express who they truly are or who they want to become." I saved every dollar I earned, not out of my father's obsessive frugality, but with purpose. I was building a future fund, planning my escape, just as Eric had done. College applications became my secret project, with Angela guiding me toward programs in interior design. When my acceptance letter from Parsons School of Design arrived with a partial scholarship offer, I knew the moment of confrontation couldn't be delayed any longer. I had to tell my father about my plans. The explosion was exactly as I'd anticipated. We sat at our dining table, the same one where countless lectures on frugality had been delivered as I showed him my acceptance letter. "Interior design. You want to waste your life helping rich people spend their money on useless decorations." His face flushed with anger. "Absolutely not. If you want college, you'll study business or finance. Something practical that will give you actual skills." "This is a skill, Dad. It's what I'm good at. It's what I love. Love doesn't pay bills. This frivolous nonsense will leave you broke and dependent. No daughter of mine is going to waste money on such a useless degree." When I explained about my scholarship and savings, he laughed coldly. "That won't cover half of what you need. And I'm certainly not wasting my hard-earned money on this nonsense. If you want to throw your life away on something so shallow, you'll do it without my help. My mother sat silently, eyes downcast, another argument she wouldn't intervene in. Years of financial control had stripped away her ability to contradict him, even when it came to her daughter's future. That night, I made my decision. I would go to Parsons with or without his support. I would take out loans if necessary, work multiple jobs, do whatever it took. The alternative, staying trapped in my father's warped value system, was unthinkable. The months leading up to my departure were filled with icy silence from my father and tearful secret conversations with my mother. "He loves you," she would insist. "He just wants you to be secure." "There are different kinds of security, Mom," I would reply. "And what good is financial security if you're miserable?" On the day I left for New York, my father didn't even come out of his study to say goodbye. My mother hugged me tight at the door, pressing an envelope into my hand. Inside was $500 and a note for something pretty for your dorm room. "I believe in you." As the bus pulled away from Boston, I felt both terror and exhilaration. At 18, I was finally free to discover who I really was, beyond my father's limiting beliefs. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew it would be of my own design. The transition from my father's austere household to the vibrant energy of New York City and college life was overwhelming at first. My dorm room at Parsons was tiny, barely larger than a closet, with institutional furniture and blank walls. But unlike my childhood bedroom, where decoration was discouraged, as wasteful, this space was mine to transform. With the $500 from my mother and my careful eye for bargains, I turned that sterile box into a showcase of what could be done on a budget. Vintage fabric became curtains, salvaged wood became floating shelves, and carefully selected thrift store finds added character. Soon students from other floors were stopping by to see that amazing room on 3. My roommate Jessica came from a wealthy Connecticut family and initially seemed like my polar opposite. Her side of the room featured designer accessories and expensive electronics. But rather than judging each other, we developed a friendship based on our complementary perspectives. "I've never met anyone who can make $20 go as far as you can," she would marvel as I returned from Brooklyn flea markets with treasures. In turn, Jessica taught me about quality investment pieces, the kind that last for decades rather than seasons. Balancing academics, work, and any semblance of a social life proved challenging. I took on every job I could find. Barista in the mornings, retail in the evenings, and weekend gigs, helping professors organize their offices or homes. Every dollar went toward tuition supplies or rent, with almost nothing left for luxuries like eating out or new clothes. During these exhausting days, I would sometimes hear my father's voice in my head. "See how hard this is. This is what happens when you make foolish choices." The doubt would creep in during late nights when I was struggling to complete design projects after 8-hour shifts. Was he right? Was I being impractical, chasing a dream that would leave me perpetually struggling? These doubts collided with my emerging design philosophy. In classes, I was learning about luxury materials, high-end furnishings, and spaces that cost more to decorate than my father's house was worth. Part of me was drawn to this world of beauty and possibility, but another part felt guilty, as if appreciating these things was a betrayal of my upbringing. The breakthrough came during my sophomore year when one of my professors assigned a project to design a small cafe on a tight budget, while other students struggled with the limitations. I thrived. My design incorporated salvaged architectural elements, repurposed industrial lighting, and strategic use of color and texture to create a space that felt both luxurious and accessible. "This is exceptional work, Stella," my professor said during the critique. "You've created something that feels expensive without being expensive. That's a rare talent." That project led to my first real design opportunity when the owner of a new coffee shop near campus saw my proposal and hired me to consult on their interior. The budget was minimal, but with my background of making something from nothing, I turned limitations into creative challenges. When Ground Up Coffee opened with my design, it quickly became a neighborhood hotspot. The warm lighting, comfortable seating arrangements, and distinctive decor I'd created with minimal resources garnered attention from local blogs and even a small write-up in a city magazine that mentioned the talented student designer. My reputation began to grow within the school as someone who could make cheap look chic. It was a backhanded compliment that initially stung, echoing my father's criticisms, but I gradually reclaimed it as my superpower. Yes, I could create luxury with limited resources because I understood that true luxury wasn't about price tags, but about thoughtful design quality where it matters and creating spaces that resonate emotionally. By junior year, I had enough client work to cut back on some of my other jobs. Small businesses, fellow students, and faculty members sought me out for design consultations. I specialized in what I called strategic luxury, helping clients identify where to invest and where to save while creating cohesive, beautiful spaces. My father's influence still lingered in unexpected ways. I would freeze with anxiety when it came time to invoice clients, setting my rates far lower than classmates with less experience and talent. A persistent voice in my head insisted that what I did wasn't really valuable, that I was essentially charging people for frivolity. My advisor noticed this pattern and called me into her office. "You're undervaluing your work, Stella. Do you know why?" When I explained about my father's attitude toward money, and specifically toward my chosen field, she listened thoughtfully before responding. "Your father taught you that certain types of work and certain types of spending have no value. But value isn't objective. It's determined by what enriches human experience. When you create a space where someone feels at peace, inspired, or simply at home, you're adding immeasurable value to their life." This conversation marked a turning point in how I viewed my own worth. If my work brought value to others, if it improved their daily experience, then it deserved fair compensation. Gradually, I raised my rates to reflect the true value of my expertise, though never without that little voice questioning whether I was becoming the wasteful person my father warned against. As graduation approached, I sent an invitation to my parents for the ceremony. My mother called immediately, excited and proud, but hedged when I asked if they would both attend. "Your father, he's still having a hard time accepting your choice, sweetheart. Give him time. Time." As if 4 years wasn't enough to acknowledge that I had created a viable future for myself. On graduation day, my mother came alone clutching a small gift bag. Inside was a silver compass on a chain. "To help you find your way," she said, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become, Stella. So proud of your courage to follow your own path." The empty seat beside her spoke volumes about my father's continued disapproval. He had refused to witness my achievement, still convinced that my degree was worthless, my passion misguided. That absence hardened something in me. If he couldn't recognize my success on my terms, then I would need to achieve the kind of success even he couldn't dismiss. As I accepted my diploma, I made a silent promise to myself. I would build a career and a life so undeniably successful that one day my father would have to acknowledge that he had been wrong about me, about my choices, and about what truly constitutes value in this world. With my degree in hand and a small but impressive portfolio, I stepped into the competitive world of New York interior design. The transition from student to professional came with a steep learning curve. No matter how talented you are in school, the real world demands a different set of skills. Client management, budgeting, vendor relationships, contracts, all aspects I had to learn, alongside continuing to develop my design skills. I was fortunate to be hired by Meridian Design, a boutique firm specializing in residential spaces. The salary was modest, barely enough to cover my expenses in one of the world's most expensive cities, but the opportunity to learn from established designers was invaluable. My first apartment was a 5th-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, a studio so small that with arms outstretched, I could nearly touch both walls. The bathroom was a closet with plumbing the kitchen, a miniature approximation of what kitchens should be. But it was mine, the first space that was truly my own, not shared with roommates or subject to dorm regulations. Despite its limitations, or perhaps because of them, I poured my heart into that tiny apartment. Every inch was considered, every piece carefully selected or created. I scoured estate sales, flea markets, and even street corners on trash day, looking for discarded items with potential. A battered credenza became a statement piece with new hardware and a custom paint treatment. Vintage frames grouped together created an elegant gallery wall. Strategic lighting transformed the perception of space. Friends and colleagues who visited were amazed at the transformation. "It feels so much bigger than it is," they would comment, or "How did you make a shoebox feel like a jewel box?" These compliments validated my approach, but I still struggled with the internalized voice of my father, questioning every purchase, every aesthetic choice. 6 months into my position at Meridian, I was assigned to assist on a luxury penthouse project. The clients were a couple in their 40s who had recently sold their tech company for millions. They wanted their new home to reflect their success while still feeling warm and personal. The lead designer, Marcus, was known for his maximalist approach and commanding personality. He welcomed client input only to the extent that it aligned with his vision. When the clients expressed interest in incorporating family heirlooms and personal collections into the design, Marcus dismissed their ideas as cluttering the aesthetic. During a tense meeting where the clients were clearly frustrated but hesitant to challenge the celebrated designer, I took a risk. What if we created a dedicated space to showcase your collections, I suggested. A room designed specifically to highlight these meaningful pieces while keeping the rest of the home in line with the overall concept. The clients loved the idea. Marcus was less enthusiastic but recognized the solution kept his vision largely intact while addressing the client's emotional needs. After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "Good save in there, Stella. You have an instinct for balancing the personal with the polished. Not everyone gets that balance right." This moment led to more responsibility on the project, and I found myself directly communicating with clients and vendors, developing specific elements of the design under Marcus's supervision. The experience was exhilarating, but also triggered deep anxiety. Working with budgets that seemed astronomical to me, I would hesitate before ordering expensive items, questioning whether they were truly necessary or if more affordable alternatives might serve just as well. Marcus noticed my hesitation. "In this business, you can't be afraid of price tags, Stella. Our clients are paying for the best, and that often means the most expensive. It's not wasteful if it's what delivers the result they want." I nodded as if I understood, but the deeply ingrained frugality my father had instilled made every high-end purchase feel almost physically painful. I would lie awake at night worrying about recommending a $10,000 sofa or a custom dining table that cost more than a car. Was I becoming the kind of person my father despised? Someone who encouraged wasteful spending on frivolous things. It was during this internal struggle that I met Ryan Blackwood at a design industry event. Tall with kind eyes and an easy smile, he approached me as I stood examining a display of sustainable luxury materials. "Interesting contrast, isn't it?" he said, gesturing to the reclaimed wood paired with gold leaf. The rawness with the refinement. Something about his observation resonated with my own design philosophy, and we fell into an easy conversation about the intersection of luxury and sustainability. Ryan turned out to be a real estate developer who specialized in boutique residential buildings, bringing in designers to create model units that would help sell the properties. "Most developers just want flashy staging that will impress during showings," he explained. "I'm more interested in creating spaces that people can actually imagine living in. Luxury that feels accessible, not intimidating." His perspective aligned perfectly with my emerging design approach. We exchanged cards, and within a week he contacted me about consulting on a model apartment in his newest building. It would be my first independent project outside of Meridian, something I could pursue on evenings and weekends. The opportunity was perfect, but the thought of taking it on stirred up my deepest insecurities. Would I be able to handle the responsibility? Would my tendency toward frugality clash with the luxury expectations? What if I failed and confirmed all my father's predictions about my chosen career? Despite these fears, I accepted the project. The model unit was a 2-bedroom apartment in a converted factory building in Chelsea. The bones were magnificent, with high ceilings, exposed brick and large windows, but it needed a design that would help potential buyers see themselves living there. The budget Ryan allocated was generous by my standards, but modest compared to the penthouse project at Meridian. This constraint actually helped ease my anxiety. I couldn't just throw money at the design. I had to be strategic, which played to my strengths. I created a concept that honored the building's industrial past while incorporating luxurious elements that elevated the space. Vintage factory lights rewired and refinished. Custom furniture built by local artisans from reclaimed materials. Strategic use of high-end textiles and finishes in areas where they would have the most impact. Working on the model unit became my passion. I would go there after my day job, sometimes staying until midnight, adjusting layouts, testing lighting concepts, obsessing over every detail. Ryan would occasionally stop by to check progress, always offering encouragement and practical feedback without trying to control the creative direction. When the model unit was finally complete, Ryan organised a small reception for potential buyers and local real estate agents. Standing in the space I had created, listening to the genuine praise and watching people respond positively to my design choices, I felt a validation I had never experienced before. "You've done something remarkable here," Ryan said, finding me alone by the windows after most guests had left. "This doesn't just look like a beautiful space. It feels like a home someone would love to live in. That's much harder to achieve." His appreciation of the emotional aspect of design, The way spaces make people feel struck a chord. For the first time, I fully understood that what I created had value beyond the material. I wasn't just selecting pretty things to fill space. I was creating environments that shaped human experience. The model unit sold the next day, and 2 other potential buyers asked if they could purchase the exact furnishings and finishes for their own units. Ryan immediately offered me contracts for the remaining model units in the building with a fee that made me gasp when I saw it. "This is too much," I protested. "Actually, it's market rate for your level of talent," he replied matter-of-factly. "Don't undervalue yourself, Stella. What you do matters." As my professional confidence grew personal, tragedy struck. My mother, who had been my quiet supporter through all the difficult years with my father, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. The news came via a terse phone call from my father. "Your mother is gone. The funeral is Saturday." Click. I returned to Boston in a fog of grief, staying in a hotel rather than the house where I grew up. The funeral was small, attended mostly by my mother's colleagues and a few relatives. My father stood stoic and distant, accepting condolences with rigid formality. When I approached him after the service, his eyes were red but dry. "She was proud of you," he said, the words clearly difficult for him, "despite your choices." Even in this moment of shared loss, he couldn't resist the subtle dig at my career. I wanted to rage at him to point out that while he had controlled every aspect of my mother's life, including her finances, he couldn't control her love and pride for me. But what would be the point? In his grief, he was more entrenched than ever in his rigid worldview. "I'm sorry for your loss, Dad," I said instead, giving him the gentleness he had rarely shown me. "She loved you very much." He nodded stiffly, then turned to speak with the funeral director about costs. Even at his wife's funeral, money was at the forefront of his mind. I left Boston the next day carrying a small box of my mother's personal items, including photos of us together and the few pieces of jewelry she had owned. On the train back to New York, I made a decision. I would honor my mother by living fully and joyfully, by creating beauty in the world she had too rarely experienced herself. And one day, I would show my father that my path had been the right one for me, even if he could never understand it. 5 years can transform a life completely. By the time I turned 32, I had built Stella Designs into a respected name in New York's interior design community. After 2 years of juggling my day job with independent projects, I had taken the leap to start my own firm, beginning with a client list of mostly referrals from Ryan's real estate connections. Those early days of entrepreneurship were terrifying and exhilarating. Every decision was mine to make, every success or failure, my responsibility alone. The financial insecurity triggered all my childhood anxieties about money, but I pushed through, reminding myself that investment in my business wasn't the wasteful spending my father had condemned, but necessary for growth. Gradually, my client base expanded beyond Ryan's network. A magazine feature on one of my projects brought attention from wealthy homeowners looking for my particular blend of luxury and authenticity. My signature approach, combining high-end elements with vintage or repurposed pieces, resonated with clients tired of cookie-cutter luxury that felt impersonal despite the high price tags. I developed a design philosophy I called meaningful luxury, centered on the idea that true luxury isn't about spending the most, but about creating the most value, both aesthetic and emotional. Each space I designed included elements with stories, whether family heirlooms, artisan, crafted pieces with a clear provenance, or items with personal significance to the client. My business grew steadily, allowing me to hire a small team and move into a proper office in the Flatiron district. The anxiety about finances never fully disappeared, but success provided a certain security that helped quiet my father's voice in my head. I was proving him wrong with every successful project, every satisfied client, every feature in design publications. As my professional life flourished, my relationship with Ryan evolved from professional to personal. What began as mutual respect grew into friendship and eventually love. Ryan understood my complex relationship with luxury and success in a way few others could. He had built his own business from scratch, faced his own struggles, and developed values that aligned with mine about what truly matters in life. With financial success came the ability to create my own ideal living space. I purchased a pre-war apartment in a historic building near Gramercy Park, a 2-bedroom with original architectural details and large windows overlooking a tree-lined street. The purchase itself was a psychological hurdle, investing so much in a personal space, when my father's voice still whispered that such things were unnecessary extravagance. But this apartment became my sanctuary and showcase. I approached designing my own home with the same philosophy I brought to client projects, but with an even more personal touch. Every item was chosen not just for beauty or function, but for meaning. Vintage pieces I had collected over the years, art from emerging creators I had discovered and supported, custom furniture made by artisans I had developed relationships with. The result was a space that visitors described as soulful luxury. Not showy or ostentatious, but rich with character and quality. Design magazines requested to feature it, and I agreed to a spread in Architectural Digest, partly hoping that somehow my father might see it and understand what I had created. The article titled "Stella Vision: How Stella Morgan Redefines Luxury for a New Generation" praised my approach to creating spaces with emotional resonance as well as visual impact. The writer noted how my designs combine high-end elements with soulful vintage pieces, creating environments that feel both luxurious and authentic, a difficult balance that Morgan achieves with apparent effortlessness. Shortly after the article was published, I received a call from a production company wanting to feature me in a documentary series about innovative designers. The exposure led to even more high-profile clients, including celebrities and business leaders, who appreciated my thoughtful approach to luxury. My product line, a collection of lighting and accessories manufactured in collaboration with artisans, using sustainable practices, launched to critical acclaim and strong sales. The pieces were expensive by normal standards, but accessible compared to many luxury brands, embodying my belief that quality design should be available at various price points. Throughout this period of success, I had minimal contact with my father. Christmas cards, brief phone calls on his birthday. He never asked about my work, and I stopped offering information he didn't want to hear. The emotional distance was a protective measure for both of us, avoiding the inevitable conflict between his rigid beliefs and my lived reality. But as my public profile grew, I knew he must be aware of my success. Did he see it as a betrayal of his values, or had time softened his judgment? I couldn't know without engaging directly, something I had carefully avoided. The catalyst for change came unexpectedly. Ryan proposed during a weekend trip to the Berkshires, presenting me with a vintage engagement ring he had carefully selected, knowing my preference for pieces with history. As we celebrated our engagement, I felt the absence of family acutely. Ryan's parents were supportive and warm, already treating me like a daughter. The contrast with my own family situation was painful. I want to try once more with my father, I told Ryan that night. Before we get married, I want to give him the chance to be part of my life, to see who I've become. Ryan understood. His own relationship with his father had been complicated, though they had reconciled before his father's death. Just remember that his reaction isn't a reflection of your worth, he cautioned. You've built something beautiful, Stella, with or without his approval. The next day, I called my father for the first time in over a year. The conversation was awkward, stilted, but he agreed to visit New York to see my apartment and meet Ryan. I was shocked by his acceptance, but tried to temper my expectations. One visit wouldn't erase decades of judgment and misunderstanding. As the date of his visit approached, I became increasingly anxious. Would he see my home as proof of my wasteful nature? Would he dismiss my success as catering to the frivolous desires of the wealthy? Would he reject Ryan simply for being associated with my chosen path? I cleaned my apartment obsessively, though it was already immaculate. I planned what to serve, what to say, how to present my life in a way that might bridge the vast gulf between his values and mine. The night before his arrival, I barely slept my mind, racing with scenarios and memories. The morning my father was due to arrive, I stood in my beautiful apartment, looking around at the space I had created, the life I had built. Whatever happened today, I reminded myself this was real. My success was real, my happiness was real, and no one, not even Lawrence Morgan, could take that away from me. The knock came at exactly noon. My father had always been punctual to a fault, viewing tardiness as another form of wastefulness. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door to face him for the first time in years. Lawrence Morgan stood straight-backed as ever, his hair now completely grey, his face more lined, but still bearing that familiar expression of careful assessment. He wore the same style of sensible, timeless clothing he had always favoured. No concessions to fashion or trends, nothing that wouldn't last for years of practical wear. "Hello, Stella." His voice was the same, too measured and controlled. "Hi, Dad. Please come in." I stepped aside, watching as he entered my apartment, his eyes immediately scanning the space, taking inventory. I had debated how to present my home. Should I downplay the luxury elements, emphasize the practical aspects? In the end, I decided authenticity was the only approach that made sense. This was my space, a true reflection of who I had become. I wouldn't apologize for it or pretend it was something it wasn't. "Can I take your coat?" I asked, falling back on the formalities of hosting to navigate the awkwardness. He handed it over silently, still surveying the apartment, his expression unreadable. I hung his coat in the closet, using those few seconds to compose myself. "Would you like some coffee or tea?" I offered. "Coffee black," he replied, following me into the kitchen area. As I prepared the coffee with practiced movements, I felt his eyes on me on the meal espresso machine that had been a splurge purchase, on the handmade ceramic mugs from a potter in Hudson Valley whose work I collected. "This is quite a place," he finally said. The first acknowledgement of his surroundings. "Thank you. I've been here about 3 years now." I handed him the coffee, gesturing toward the living area. "Let's sit." We settled in the living room, my father perching on the edge of a vintage leather armchair I had found at an estate sale and had professionally restored. I sat across from him on the sofa, cradling my own coffee like a shield. "So this is what you do," he said, gesturing vaguely around the room. "Make places look like this." "Yes, I design spaces for clients, and I have a product line of lighting and accessories." I kept my tone neutral, factual, avoiding any hint of defensiveness. "I saw the magazine article," he admitted, surprising me. "Your mother would have been proud." The mention of my mother created a lump in my throat. I think of her often when I'm working. She always encouraged my creativity. A flicker of something, perhaps pain or regret, crossed his face before the stoic mask returned. "Show me around then, since this is what you do." I stood, relieved to have a purpose, a script to follow. The professional in me took over as I guided him through the apartment, explaining design choices, pointing out special pieces and the stories behind them. This dining table was made by a woodworker in Brooklyn, using reclaimed oak from a demolished water tower. The chairs are vintage Danish, reupholstered in Italian wool. I ran my hand along the table's smooth surface, remembering the day it was delivered, how right it had felt in the space. My father listened silently, his expression giving nothing away. In the bedroom, he paused at a framed black and white photograph on the wall, a misty landscape of the Boston Public Garden. "Your mother took that," he said quietly. "During that photography class she took at the community college." I nodded, touched that he had recognized it. "It's one of my favorite things. I had it professionally framed when I moved in here." We completed the tour in my home office, where examples of my product line were displayed alongside design books and material samples. My father picked up one of my signature lamps, examining the base made of brass and reclaimed wood. "How much does something like this sell for?" He asked the question I had been dreading. "The retail price is $850. I answered honestly, resisting the urge to justify the cost by explaining the craftsmanship, the facade, the materials, the fair wages paid to the artisans who created each piece. He set the lamp down carefully. "And people pay that?" "Yes, the line has been very successful. We're actually expanding into more or home accessories next season." Back in the living room, we sat again in awkward silence. I waited for his judgment, the inevitable criticism about wastefulness or frivolity or shallow priorities. When it came, it was both expected and still painful. "All this," he gestured around, "it's very impressive looking, but it's essentially helping people spend money on things they don't need." I had prepared for this. "I see it differently. I help people create homes that reflect who they are, that bring them joy and comfort." "That's not frivolous, Dad. It's deeply human to want your surroundings to have meaning. Meaning comes from character, from values, not from possessions." He countered the familiar argument rising between us. "The things themselves aren't the meaning," I explained. "They're expressions of meaning. Take that coffee table." I pointed to the piece in front of us, a striking design with a base made from salvaged industrial gears and a glass top. I found those gears at an abandoned factory in Pennsylvania. The owner was going to scrap them. I saw beauty in their history, in the craftsmanship of a different era. Now, instead of being melted down, they have a second life. There's value in that preservation, in that appreciation of craft. My father looked at the table with slightly more interest. "So you saved them from being wasted?" "Exactly. Much of what I do involves preservation, recontextualization, finding new value in things others might discard." I leaned forward. "Remember how you always taught me that waste was wrong? I still believe that. I just define waste differently than you do." He took a sip of his coffee, considering. "But surely most of what you do is buying new expensive things, like this kitchen." He gestured toward my open concept kitchen with its marble countertops and high-end appliances. Some elements are worth investing in, I acknowledged. Quality that lasts for decades rather than years. But even here, there's a mix. Those pendant lights are vintage rewired and restored. The bar stools were salvaged from a closing restaurant and reupholstered. As I explained my approach to strategic luxury, combining investment pieces with creative reuse, I saw my father listening with grudging interest. Then he asked about a specific cabinet in my dining area, an admittedly expensive custom piece I had commissioned. I explained the craftsmanship involved the sustainable sourcing of the wood, the livelihood supported by purchasing from independent artisans rather than mass manufacturers. As I detailed the thought process behind selecting this piece over less expensive alternatives, I saw a familiar expression cross his face: disapproval. "You're justifying extravagance," he said, cutting me off. "All these explanations about meaning and quality, they're just fancy words for spending too much on things that serve the same purpose as something half the price." The criticism stung, but I held my ground. "It's not just about function, Dad. It's about creating an environment that enriches daily life. That's valuable. Valuable to who? To people with too much money who need to show off. To anyone who wants their home to feel like a true reflection of themselves, not just a collection of the cheapest possible solutions." My voice remained calm, but I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. My father scoffed, looking around the apartment again. "You know what I see here? I see someone trying very hard to look like they belong in a world of wealth and excess. All this talk about meaning and connection, it's just dressing up the fact that you're part of a system that encourages people to waste resources on appearances." The accusation hit a nerve, touching on my own occasional doubts about my place in the luxury design world. But I knew my work had integrity, that my approach was thoughtful, not frivolous. "You don't understand what I do because you've never allowed yourself to see value in beauty or comfort," I replied. "You've reduced everything to dollars and functionality as if humans are just machines that need the most efficient maintenance possible. And you've gone to the opposite extreme," he shot back, "surrounding yourself with expensive trappings to prove something. When it comes down to it, Stella, you're nothing but cheap. Trying to buy significance with overpriced furniture and fancy appliances." The words hung in the air between us. "You're nothing but cheap." Not frugal or economical, which he would consider compliments, but cheap, small, of little value, the ultimate insult in his lexicon. In that moment, something shifted inside me. All these years I had been seeking his approval, hoping to prove that my path had merit, even by his stringent standards. But standing in my beautiful home, surrounded by the evidence of my success and happiness, I realized his approval was irrelevant. His values were not mine, and they never would be. I looked him directly in the eyes, no longer the intimidated daughter, but a confident woman, secure in her choices. "No, Dad, I'm not cheap, I'm valuable. Not because of what I own, but because of what I create. I bring beauty and meaning into people's lives. I help them express who they are through their environments. That has real value whether you can see it or not." My voice remained steady, my gaze unwavering. "And if you could step outside your rigid ideas about money for just one moment, you might see that there's more to life than saving every possible dollar. There's joy in beauty, comfort in thoughtful surroundings, and yes, value in creating spaces that feel like home." I stood up, gesturing around the apartment. "Everything you see here represents a choice I made consciously, not to show off or waste resources, but to create a place that feels authentically mine. Some things were expensive, some were practically free. But each one matters not because of its price tag, but because of what it brings to this space and to my life." My father remained seated, his expression somewhere between surprise and uncertainty. He wasn't used to me standing my ground so firmly, speaking with such conviction. "I've spent years trying to prove my worth to you," I continued, "trying to show that my path has value even by your standards. But I realize now that I don't need your validation. I know the worth of what I do. My clients know it. The people who work with me know it." I moved toward the window, looking out at the city I had made my home. "I didn't invite you here to convince you that I'm right and you're wrong. I invited you because despite everything, you're my father and I wanted to share my life with you. But I won't apologize for that life, or pretend it's something it's not to make you comfortable." In the silence that followed, I wondered if I had finally severed whatever tenuous connection remained between us. But when I turned back to face him, I saw something unexpected in his expression. Not anger, but uncertainty. Perhaps even the faintest glimmer of respect. The tension between us hung heavy in the air. My father's accusation, "You're nothing but cheap," had stripped away any pretense of polite reconciliation. We were finally facing the fundamental divide in our values, the conflicting definitions of worth that had separated us for decades. I didn't expect what happened next. My father rose from his chair and walked slowly to the window where I stood. For a long moment he gazed out at the city skyline, his profile stern but somehow more vulnerable than I remembered. "Your mother wanted this kind of beauty in our home," he said finally, his voice quieter than before. "She would bring home little things sometimes. A vase, a picture frame. I always told her they were unnecessary expenses." This glimpse into my parents' private dynamic surprised me. My mother had rarely contradicted my father openly, especially about money. Learning that she had made these small attempts to bring beauty into our austere home touched me deeply. She had an eye for beautiful things, I offered. "I probably got that from her." My father nodded slightly. "She said that once. That you inherited her appreciation for beauty and my determination." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Apparently a powerful combination. This moment of connection, however slight, gave me courage to continue. I gestured to the sofa. "Let's sit again. I want to show you something." We returned to the living area, but this time I directed him to sit beside me on the sofa. From the coffee table, I picked up a small wooden box, simple but elegantly crafted. "Do you recognize this?" I asked, placing it in his hands. He examined it with furrowed brow. "Should I? You gave it to me on my 12th birthday. It was the only gift you ever selected personally, not something Mom picked out. You said it was practical for keeping small valuables organized." His expression shifted as memory returned. "Walnut. From that craftsman at the summer fair. It was well made, meant to last." "It was beautiful," I corrected gently. "Practical, yes, but also beautiful. And I treasured it because you chose it, because for once you valued something beyond just its function." I took the box back, opening it to reveal the contents. A few small jewelry pieces, including my mother's compass necklace, and a folded piece of paper. I've kept it all these years through every move. When I look at it, I don't think about how practical it is. I think about how it made me feel when you gave it to me. Seen, valued. I paused. "That's what good design does, Dad. It creates emotional connections. It makes spaces and objects meaningful beyond their basic utility." I unfolded the paper from the box, revealing the same watercolor family portrait he had torn up when I was 10. "Mom saved the pieces," I explained, seeing his shocked expression. "She taped them together and kept it hidden. She gave it to me when I left for college." My father stared at the childish painting, the tape lines still visible across the figures of our family, standing hand in hand before a simply rendered house. His hand trembled slightly as he reached toward it, but stopped short of touching the fragile paper. "I didn't understand," he said finally. "I saw waste where I should have seen expression." The admission, however small, was more than I had ever expected. I placed my hand gently on his arm. "It's not too late to see differently, Dad." He looked up from the painting to meet my gaze, his eyes revealing a conflict I had never witnessed before. "I've spent my entire life believing that financial prudence was the highest virtue, that protecting against scarcity was more important than anything else. I watched my own father lose everything in bad investments. The shame of it, the hardship that followed. I swore my family would never experience that." This was new information, a glimpse into the origins of his extreme frugality that I had never been privy to before. I didn't know about grandfather. We didn't talk about it. Too painful for him, too instructive for me. He straightened his shoulders. "But perhaps in protecting against one kind of poverty, I created another." The acknowledgement was so unexpected that I found myself momentarily speechless. My father had never admitted to any mistake, any misguided principle in all the years I had known him. "Your home," he continued, glancing around the apartment. "It's not what I would choose for myself, too many things that aren't strictly necessary, but I can see that it expresses something essential about who you are. There's a coherence to it, a thoughtfulness." Coming from him, this was extraordinary praise. I felt tears threatening but blinked them back. "Thank you for seeing that." "And this business you've built," he continued. "It's successful, financially stable." The questions were asked without his usual judgment, with what seemed like genuine interest. "Very successful," I confirmed. "I have 8 employees now, a studio space in the Flatiron district, and more client requests than I can accept. The product line is carried in high-end stores across the country and expanding internationally next year." He nodded, processing this information. "And you're careful with the business finances, proper accounting savings for downturns." I couldn't help but smile at this return to familiar territory. Yes, Dad, I run a tight ship financially. I've never taken on debt beyond my initial business loan, which was paid off in the first 3 years. I maintain substantial reserves and invest profits carefully. This information visibly relaxed him. Good, that's good. I learnt that from you, I acknowledged. The importance of financial responsibility. I just apply it differently. This recognition of his positive influence seemed to affect him deeply. He cleared his throat, clearly emotional, but working to maintain composure. You're Ryan, he said, changing the subject. He was supposed to be here. He had a last-minute meeting with investors. He'll join us for dinner. I hesitated, then added, we're engaged. My father's eyebrows rose. Engaged? When did this happen? Last month. It's why I reached out to you. I wanted you to meet him before the wedding. I twisted the vintage ring on my finger. He's a good man, Dad. Smart, hard-working kind. You'll like him. He's in real estate development, correct? From the article, I nodded. He builds boutique residential buildings. Quality construction, thoughtful design, not just maximum profit per square foot. My father considered this. Sounds like a solid business model in a city like New York. The conversation shifted to more neutral territory. My father asking detailed questions about Ryan's business, my company structure, even my investment strategies. These were comfortable topics for him, and I recognized his engagement with them as an olive branch of sorts. As afternoon turned to evening, Ryan arrived and I watched with amazement as my father engaged with him, businessman to businessman, with a respect he had rarely shown me. Ryan handled the interaction beautifully, neither defensive nor overly deferential, sharing his business philosophy and listening thoughtfully to my father's occasionally pointed questions. Over dinner at my favorite neighborhood restaurant, I observed a gradual thawing between the two most important men in my life. They found common ground in discussions of real estate markets, construction costs, and investment strategies, while I occasionally steered the conversation toward more personal topics. When Ryan excused himself briefly from the table, my father leaned toward me. He values substance over show, he said approvingly, and he clearly respects your work. He understands what matters to me, I replied, and I understand what matters to him. We balance each other. My father nodded, studying me with new eyes. You've built a good life, Stella. Different than what I would have chosen for you, but undeniably successful, on your own terms. The acknowledgement, simple as it was, filled a space in my heart that had been empty for too long. Not complete healing, not full acceptance, but a beginning. I would like to be part of this life, he added the words clearly difficult for him. If there's room for an old man set in his ways. Tears threatened again, and this time I didn't fight them. There's always been room for you, Dad, always. When Ryan returned, he found us in this emotional moment and tactfully engaged my father in conversation about Boston, giving me time to compose myself. The rest of the evening passed in a warm glow of cautious reconciliation, not erasing the past but opening possibilities for the future. Back at my apartment saying goodbye, my father surprised me with an awkward but sincere hug. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become, he whispered. And I am too, even if I don't always understand your choices. Thank you, I replied, returning the embrace. That means more than you know. After he left, Ryan held me as I processed the emotional day. That went better than you expected, he observed. Much better. I agreed. Not perfect, not complete, but a real start. In the weeks and months that followed, my relationship with my father evolved slowly but steadily. Weekly phone calls, occasional visits. He made efforts to understand my work, even accompanying me to a client installation, once watching with newfound respect, as I transformed an empty apartment into a home. The healing wasn't instantaneous or complete. My father still winced at what he considered extravagant expenses. He still questioned some of my design choices. Old habits and beliefs don't disappear overnight. But he was trying, and so was I. The most profound change was internal. I no longer felt the need to justify my choices or prove my worth to him. I had found security in my own values, my own definition of success. Whether he fully approved or not had ceased to be the measure of my life. On my wedding day, when my father walked me down the aisle, he paused before giving my hand to Ryan. You've taught me that true value isn't just about what something costs, he said quietly. It's about what it brings to your life. And you, Stella, bring immeasurable value to the lives you touch. As Ryan and I built our life together, eventually moving into a brownstone, we renovated ourselves. My father became a regular visitor. He never fully embraced my aesthetic sensibilities, but he came to respect the thought and intention behind them, and I came to appreciate the financial wisdom he had tried, however imperfectly, to instill in me. The greatest transformation came when we had our daughter named Diana after my mother. Watching my father with her, I saw a gentleness I had rarely witnessed in my childhood. He still bought practical gifts, but now they were accompanied by small, beautiful things as well. A practical savings bond and a delicate music box, a college fund contribution and a handcrafted dollhouse. The words that once wounded me, "You're nothing but cheap," became a reminder of how far we had both come. In my home, filled with both beauty and substance, surrounded by family, both given and chosen, I had discovered my true value. Not in the price tags of my possessions or the prestige of my career, but in the life I had designed with intention, authenticity, and love. Have you ever had someone misjudge your worth based on what you value? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and growth. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' opinions or what you own, but by the authentic life you choose to create. Thank you for listening, and may you always recognize your true value, regardless of what others might say.